Imagine an ocean where nothing has teeth, yet absolutely everything is being torn to shreds. You are swimming 360 million years in the past, the Late Devonian period. Do not look for whales. There are no marine reptiles. Sharks exist, but they're just small, nervous bottom feeders trying to stay out of the way. Evolution is still in its experimental phase. It has not even invented proper teeth yet, but the ocean is already an absolute bloodbath. Survival in these warm, shallow waters is so brutally difficult that fish have been forced to wear their skeletons on the outsides of their bodies. This is the era of the placoderms, armored fish. They look less like biological animals and more like military submarines wrapped in thick, impenetrable bone plating. And the absolute undisputed king of this prehistoric nightmare ocean is the beast called Dunkleosteus, a heavily armored biological tank built entirely for murder. Now, to truly understand the sheer violence of Dunkleosteus, you have to understand the brutal environment that created it. The Devonian Sea was not a peaceful coral reef paradise. It was a giant, churning blender. Soft tissue was basically a death sentence. Before this era, early fish were mostly jawless bottom feeders that sucked up detritus from the mud. But then, an evolutionary miracle happened. Vertebrates developed jaws. Suddenly, things could bite. And the moment biting became a reality, biological defenses had to catch up instantly. To survive this new predatory hellscape, early fish had to literally bolt thick metal-like plates of armor to their bodies. Evolution had not yet optimized these animals for speed, elegancy, or agility. It optimized them for absolute defense. Everything in the water was slow, heavy, and covered in thick sheets of solid bone. In many placoderms, the outer layer of the armor was actually composed of a substance extremely similar to dentin and enamel. They literally covered their bodies in the same hard material that makes up modern human teeth. If you want to eat in the Devonian Ocean, you had to figure out how to crack open a living, swimming bank vault wrapped in tooth enamel. Nature needed a heavy-duty can opener, so it built Dunkleosteus. Most people picture terrifying sea monsters as massive great white sharks or mosasaurs, possessing endless rows of serrated teeth. Dunkleosteus threw that standard blueprint straight into the trash. It never actually developed true teeth. Instead, the skull itself weaponized. The upper and lower jawbones extended outward, forming two massive exposed blades of solid bone. These were not individual teeth sitting in fragile sockets. They were continuous, massive plates known to science as inferonathal and superonathal bones. And they featured a brilliant, extremely deadly piece of biological engineering. These bony plates rubbed against each other every single time the fish opened and closed its mouth. The friction acted exactly like a biological whetstone. Every single bite sharpened the blades. The more the creature ate, the deadlier its weapon became. If it stopped eating or opening its mouth, the bone would continue to grow indefinitely, potentially dulling or completely misaligning the cutting edge. But through constant, aggressive hunting, Dunkleosteus possessed a permanent, self-sharpening set of meat cleavers strapped directly to its face. These bony plates did not just grab prey and hold it in place, they sheared right through it like an industrial guillotine. The raw bite force was absolutely catastrophic. In 2006, biomechanical engineers at the Field Museum of Natural History used fossilized head shields to recreate the exact musculature of the Dunkleosteus skull. They ran complex computer simulations to test exactly how hard this animal could clamp down onto its prey, and the resulting data revealed a bite force of roughly 5,300 to 7,400 newtons at the rear edge of the blade. For a quick comparison, an average adult human bites down with about 700 newtons. But that massive number is just the raw closing force at the back of the mouth. The true horror of this animal was concentrated at the very tip of its front fangs. Because the surface area of the fang tip was incredibly microscopic, all that immense jaw pressure was concentrated into a pinpoint impact. The resulting force measured an unbelievable 150 million pascals. That is roughly 21,000 pounds per square inch of sheer destructive pressure. To put that completely into perspective, that is more than enough force to cleanly puncture high-grade Kevlar. Only a Tyrannosaurus rex or a modern saltwater crocodile hits with more localized pressure. Dunkleosteus could bite straight through the thickest, most durable armor evolution had ever designed up to that point. It shattered the thick shells of giant ammonites and crushed other placoderms like they were made of cheap glass. But a strong bite is entirely useless if your prey simply swims away before you can close your jaws. Heavy armor usually makes an animal extremely slow and sluggish. Dunkleosteus was covered in heavy 2-inch thick bone plates from its snout all the way down to its chest. It even had specialized bony rings inside its eye sockets called sclerotic rings, just to protect its eyes from the intense water pressure and the violent thrashing of its dying prey. Logically, a creature carrying that much physical weight should have been painfully slow to react. But its jaws possessed a terrifying mechanical cheat code. Placoderms evolved a highly specialized craniothoracic joint. This was essentially a biological hinge connecting the heavy skull directly to the chest armor, allowing the massive head to move completely independently. Dunkleosteus utilized a complex 4-bar linkage mechanism in its skull musculature. When a modern fish or a human opens its mouth, it just drops its lower jaw down. Dunkleosteus did not just drop its lower jaw, it dropped the lower jaw down and simultaneously threw its entire upper skull aggressively backwards. This double-hinged explosive expansion allowed the fish to open its massive jaws in just 20 milliseconds. That's exactly 1/5 of a single second. This speed is roughly 12 times faster than a normal human blinking. Now you have to factor in the actual physics of water. Water is about 800 times denser than air. When you open a massive cavity that fast underwater, it suddenly displaces a huge amount of liquid, and the ocean violently rushes straight back in to fill the sudden void, creating a massive vacuum. Because of this extreme physical reaction, Dunkleosteus did not even need to actively chase down its smaller, faster prey. It just got reasonably close, snapped its jaws open, and in a fraction of a second, the resulting suction force dragged the helpless victim backward directly into the waiting blades. Now, nature usually forces predators to choose strictly between a fast bite and a strong bite. A fast jaw requires long, thin muscles, while a crushing jaw requires thick, heavy muscles. Dunkleosteus is one of the very few creatures in the entire history of Earth to possess both at the exact same time. It pulled you in at the speed of a bullet, and then it crushed you with the force of a falling car. For decades, natural history museums around the world depicted this monster as a massive 30-foot-long leviathan. They looked at the huge 2-foot-long fossilized head shields found in places like Ohio, assumed the fish had the sleek, elongated proportions of a great white shark, and mathematically stretched the body out to perfectly match the giant head. In artwork and museum displays, it looked exactly like a gigantic, slithering sea serpent wearing a medieval knight's helmet. But the scientific process is completely ruthless. In 2023, a massive paleontology study completely shattered the entire 30-foot myth. The core physical problem with placoderms is that they only had solid bone on their front half. Their rear halves, including their entire spines and tails, were made almost exclusively of soft cartilage. Cartilage is notorious for decaying rapidly and rarely ever fossilizing. For an entire century, no one actually knew what the back half of a Dunkleosteus really looked like because it simply rotted away in the mud before turning to stone. So, in 2023, paleontologist Russell Engelman from Cape Western Reserve University decided to finally solve the mystery. He measured the orbit-opercular length of hundreds of modern fish species. This specific measurement is the exact distance from the fish's eye to the back of its gills. He then meticulously compared those measurements to rare, highly complete fossils of smaller placoderm species that actually managed to fossilize fully. A strict, universal biological rule quickly emerged from all the data. Short fish generally have short heads. Long fish generally have long heads. Dunkleosteus had a very short, very tall, and extremely boxy head. The mathematical data was absolute and undeniable. The 30-foot sea serpent never actually existed. The real Dunkleosteus was much smaller, measuring about only 11 to 13 feet long. However, this massive downgrade did not make the creature any less terrifying. It was not small, it was just incredibly dense. The new 2023 reconstruction revealed a creature built exactly like a gigantic, heavily armored tuna on steroids. Paleontologists affectionately nicknamed the brand new model the Chunky Dunk. It had a massive barrel-shaped torso packed tightly with pure, explosive muscle. The shorter, stouter body shape is actually far more dangerous than the snake-like version. A long, slender body is terrible for generating quick, explosive bursts of speed. A compact, torpedo-shaped body is the ultimate biological design for rapid, violent acceleration. Think of the massive difference between throwing a long, winding, noodle-like snake and firing a heavy lead bullet. Dunkleosteus did not cruise slowly through the water, waiting patiently for a meal to stumble by. It was a dedicated ambush predator. It waited in the dark, it watched its surroundings with its specialized armor-plated eyes, and then it launched itself out of the gloom like a heavy subterranean missile, striking with absolute precision. We think this biological torpedo was notoriously aggressive and possessed a seemingly endless appetite. It ate absolutely everything that crossed its path. It regularly hunted early primitive sharks like Cladosalaki, easily biting them cleanly in half before they could even react. We know exactly what its daily diet consisted of because scientists have frequently found fossilized boluses of regurgitated bone located near famous Dunkleosteus feeding sites. A bolus is essentially a highly compacted mass of indigestible material. After snapping an armored fish completely in half and swallowing the giant chunks whole, the Dunkleosteus' stomach would go aggressively to work, dissolving the meat, but even its highly acidic digestive system could not melt through the thick, solid Devonian armor plates. So, rather than letting the jagged bone completely clog up its intestines, the predator simply vomited up compacted nuggets of crushed bone and then went straight back to hunting. The fossil record clearly proves that they did not just hunt other smaller species in the water. They heavily hunted each other. Paleontologists have uncovered several Dunkleosteus skull shields covered entirely in deep, jagged gouges and massive puncture wounds. When they analyzed these massive scratch marks under microscopes, they found they perfectly matched the exact shape, width, and angle of other Dunkleosteus jaw blades. They were not minor territorial scraps, they were fatal, bone-crushing blows. If two apex predators crossed paths in the Devonian Sea, they did not just posture or display dominance to simply scare the other one away. They fought to the absolute death, and the brutal winner simply ate the loser. The Late Devonian Ocean was a literal cannibalistic meat grinder, and Dunkleosteus was the chief operator. Yet, despite its perfect, brutal design, Dunkleosteus went completely extinct roughly 358 million years ago. It did not lose an evolutionary arms race to a bigger, faster, or smarter predator. It lost the entire planet. The bitter end of the Devonian period was marked strictly by the Kelvassa and the Hangenbeck events, massive global extinctions that slowly and methodically choked the absolute life out of the oceans. Global oxygen levels plummeted drastically. Suddenly, the massive, heavily armored bodies of the placoderms became a fatal evolutionary liability. A heavy, fast-accelerating torpedo requires an immense, continuous amount of oxygen to adequately fuel its dense muscles. When the water slowly turned toxic and heavily anoxic, the largest, most powerful predators simply suffocated first. The exact scientific cause of this catastrophic oxygen drop remains highly debated among researchers today. Some scientists blame massive, prolonged volcanic eruptions that permanently altered the atmosphere. Others point to a much more ironic and unexpected culprit: trees. During the Late Devonian, the very first massive forests were rapidly spreading across the land. These early trees developed incredibly deep, complex root systems that physically broke up terrestrial rocks and dumped an absolute overdose of minerals and raw nutrients directly into the rivers. All these excessive nutrients rapidly washed out into the shallow seas, triggering catastrophic global algal blooms. The algae multiplied wildly, died off, and then massive swarms of bacteria consumed the decaying plant matter, draining almost all the available dissolved oxygen from the water in the process. But whatever the actual root cause was, the era of the armored tanks ended abruptly. Dunkleosteus starved and suffocated in the dark, anoxic waters. The extinction of the placoderms created a massive biological vacuum in the oceans. The small, nervous, unarmored scavengers that had spent millions of years hiding in the absolute shadows finally had a real chance to step into the light. The sharks took over the empty throne. Without the total extinction of the placoderms, modern sharks might never have evolved to become the apex predators they are today. Evolution simply discarded the heavy armor and moved on to a sleek, cartilage-based design. But for more than 20 million years, the undisputed king of the ocean was a short, brutally dense, heavily armored fish with a massive guillotine for a face. And hey, I'll catch you next time.